Welcome everyone to Temple Bar. I'm Peter Murray, I'm Chairman of Temple Bar Trust, and it's great to have you here today as we, at the build-up to the Paris Olympics, reminding ourselves of what was happening 12 years ago in London, really. But so it'd be interesting to see whether all the niggles that are being written about in the press about Paris disappear as soon as the sports start and everyone gets into the spirit of the occasion. So anyway, this is a very good introduction to what Paris is looking like at the moment. So very pleased to have Mary here this evening. I mean, she's a founding partner of Gustafson Porter Bowman. She's asked me to point out that actually she joined Catherine Gustafson and Neil Porter in 2002, who they'd already been in practice for a little bit before then. But she trained as an architect and landscape architect, worked for Foster's for a time, and then with Walters Cohen before joining Catherine and Neil. And so what we're going to hear about tonight is the multidisciplinary design team that she's been leading on the Eiffel Tower project, which of course is going to change the shape of that little bit of Paris, but I think is very obviously sitting under Paris's most significant monument, is really going to shape our ideas about the city, and is a great way to introduce the Paris Olympics in London. And so Mary, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been an interesting, super challenging love-hate relationship with this project. We started working on it in 2018. We were one of 4 teams that were selected by the city of Paris to develop a scheme over a year in a competitive dialogue process. And we then were announced as the winners in June 2019, and we've been working on the project since then, obviously through COVID and through a painting campaign of the Eiffel Tower and the Olympics and everything else. So it's been a super interesting and extremely challenging project. But as you can see here, the Eiffel Tower site is located within a UNESCO World Heritage Site that includes, all along the river, the Tuileries, the Invalides, and the banks of the Seine. So we're quite constrained in working within this UNESCO site. And also the mayor's brief was to really transform the site, which had been really neglected over, since the 70s, really. There are, 30 million people that come to this area, 8 million people before before COVID that were going up in the tower. And a lot of the area was just really neglected. There are barriers everywhere, there's trash everywhere, there's not enough toilets, there are not enough services for people. The ground was super compacted, the trees were not well looked after, the planting was, a mess, and they've got rats. So it's sort of, that was the sort of starting point. And you can see in this aerial photo, the site is actually 2 kilometers long. It spans both sides of the river. It goes from the Place du Trocadero and Trocadero up at the top, right the way through, and all the way down the Champ de Mars to the military school. And part of the competition was to look at a vision, a 2030 vision for the overall site, and then to recommend the first phase of work, which was, we had a budget of £40 million to suggest to the city what we could do within that budget in time for the Olympics. And it was all meant to be done by December 2023. And then things happened. And these are just some of the images. I mean, the Eiffel Tower is obviously an amazing structure. And the thing that was really eye-opening is how, it's supposed to last for 5 years in the temporary exhibition. And it's been here for over 100 years. And there was, when you go into the tunnel, it's like bricolage, they never had a plan to keep, a lot of the, the rooms that the workers use or the electrics or the thing. It is a mess. And so part of the project was also we worked with architect Chartier Carbasson, and they were looking at rearranging the interiors to provide accommodation for the people that work in the Eiffel Tower. So the project, the competition entry we titled OnE, and OnE was about this kind of singular concept that would span both sides of the river. It was all, it was a unitary ambition. We wanted to unify the materials, and we wanted to talk about, one planet, one humanity, tourists, people that live there, one team working together with the city of Paris to realize the project. And then in some of these little conceptual diagrams were explaining the problem, which was that a lot of the attraction, the interest was on the Eiffel Tower, and people, being all of the focus being on the tower itself. So we wanted to actually spread out all that the activity and create many points and many doors and many entrances into the whole of the site, and really spread out the attraction over the whole of the 54 hectares. There's also a very strong monumental axis that goes through it, this 2 kilometer long, very formal space. And then around it, there is a more picturesque landscape that we wanted to transform also in terms of ecology and biodiversity, and really a kind of more contemporary planting palette. And then overlaid on top of all of that was a sort of cultural and historical narrative in terms of signage and, bringing out the characters and the wealth of characters over the whole of the site, and not just the Eiffel and the Eiffel Tower. And so these were some of the early images which show you this, which we called the landscape of power, this very formal axis, very strong. It's like a straight line that goes straight through from Trocadero all the way down to the military school. And then around it, you get this much more picturesque landscape. And that was sort of coming in at a time at the end of the 19th century, when this sort of formalism, the picturesque was being introduced to France in the form of public gardens, because you got a lot of the formal acts, Versailles and all this, the famous gardens that we know. But the idea of the picturesque, which was also English, the English garden, was also being introduced, like in this Chaumont. Another picturesque park in Paris. So the overall vision that we presented was the 54 hectare master plan, which included redoing the Place du Trocadero at the top, which is currently a roundabout. Cars circulate all around it. The Fontaine de Varsovie, which is this piece here. Redoing the bridge, not redoing it, but planting the bridge. Creating a new Place Branly just in front of the Eiffel Tower, redoing the whole of the quay, changing the traffic, reducing the car widths down, planting it, redoing the area around the Eiffel Tower itself and underneath the parvis, redoing the entrance pavilions to it, and then restoring the lawns in the Champ de Mars. Creating a new plaza space here, and another major one in front of the military school, and then redoing the gardens. So that was the overall vision. And then what we had suggested doing for 2023 was what you see on the map here. So Trocadero, the area just around the fountain, the bridge, the area underneath the Eiffel Tower, this area, which is a sports center, which is being used in the Olympics for urban sports, parkour and skate and rollerblading and all that kind of thing. That's a sort of information point there around a sports center. And then this area of the Champ de Mars. But as we started working on the project, and it became clear that because of COVID and because of painting the Eiffel Tower, and they couldn't get the north lift done in time, they started kind of hacking at different bits of it. So what we've ended up doing is this little bit, which I'll talk about, which is what we've got done before the Olympics, and the rest of it is will go back on site after the Olympics in September, October, and deliver the rest of the bits. And so part of the scheme, the brief was about making providing better amenity for guests coming to the site. It was also about greening the site, creating, reducing the amount of hard impermeable surfaces and increasing the planting. But it was also strategically to pedestrianize as much of the site as possible. And that was sort of the big, more complex move, to take all the private cars off of the bridge link and to send them around to the two bridges on either side. Public transport will be allowed over the bridge, pedestrians will be able to use it. And then Trocadero is being joined on to the Palais de Chaillot, so when you come out of the lifts, you don't have to cross traffic at that point. And the only place where we really have to cross traffic are on the two quays, and moved all the buses from originally coming through the Champ de Mars. That was then through public consultation, and the fact that Rashida Dati, who's over here in the 7th, wanted her buses. We ended up having to put the buses back into the middle of the Champ de Mars. But generally, we managed to reroute the traffic so that we could pedestrianize the whole site. So this is the first piece at the north, the Place du Trocadero, and it's, as you can see, an informal amphitheater. We've changed the traffic pattern so that it circulates around and people can come out of the tube here and on all the way around, and then come up on the big parvis between the Palais de Chaillot, down the stairs, and then through the gardens of Varsovie. And there's some images that show you what it looks like today and what the proposal is. So we're sort of regrading the area, actually moving this statue back a bit to open up the view, and then creating these step terraces. And this bit of the project had been tendered before. In 2002, it was tendered. We had actually started, the contractors were on site, and then the police stopped all work because they wanted to, use the site for the Olympics. So, and they were worried about whether we would be finished in time, the construction would be finished in time, B, security circulating around this area. So we had started in sort of September, and then we were stopped in December. And in the meantime, the city of Paris is rerouting the traffic in the way that we want it to be rerouted for the Olympics, and they're pedestrianizing this whole area, and they'll be using this for the Olympics. And then they just recently awarded the tenders went back out again this year, and they've now been awarded to contractors who will then start after the Olympics are finished. And in this image, you can see the sort of, the grand axis where you get this, incredible 2-kilometer-long view between Trocadero and the military school. And at the same time, they've also been, fixing up the Palais de Chaillot, working on the theaters there and doing a lot of street works to this area, new services and street works and so on. This was our competition entry for the area around the Varsovie fountain. And as you can see, we were sort of creating these step terraces that reinforce this really strong perspective toward the Eiffel Tower, and then planting 2 new rows of cherry trees that lined the edges. We reduced the amount of paving and increased the amount of planting on the sides here. And then in consultation with the historic architects, they were not happy that we had altered the lawns, which at the moment there are no terraces, they're just lawns. And they asked us not to do this and to simply replace the replace the lawn. So then we had to go back and after we'd already tendered it, change all the drawings and respond to that. There was always, because of COVID, there was always a delay in the feedback and the approvals and the multiple city services that we had to consult with, which were a lot of them all working obviously online and in slow time and whatever. So it's just a project that is constantly changing. But this area is the one that we've actually completed before the Olympics, and it's where the major kind of staging area is. And I'll show you some pictures of that later. So here you can see it in plan. We then redefined this area here, which today is a kind of a bit of a traffic mess, and created a plaza here, which will be pedestrianized, and the traffic will be rerouted. Most of the traffic will go into the tunnel, and then only the bus will circulate on the surface, and all of this area will then be pedestrianized for events. So here you get a sort of before and after image. So we've replaced a lot of the materials. Here you can see we've added a lot more planting, resculpted these areas, changed the sort of the NPs, planted the new trees, and then we had to do a kind of temporary planting scheme because the Olympic stands are on top of this. So we'll go back in the second phase and actually put in the rose beds that are going to go either side, which today are grass, or I don't even know, it's probably mud now because they put the stands on top of it. And this is a sort of before and after image of the Place Varsovie. So you can see there's a lot of traffic, a lot of cars. And what we've tried to do wherever possible is to plant and create as much green as we can. Paris has actually quite strict regulations about the amount of rainfall capture that you have to do. We tried to send as much water as possible into the planting beds so that it's not overloading the city system, which then just backs up and goes into the Seine. So we're picking up the water and using it as much as we can. But you can see here the sort of transformation of something that's very hard to something that will be very planted. This is the competition scheme for the bridge. So it's a historic bridge. When we sort of got into it, they didn't have a lot of records about the bridge, the loading capacity, whether it's leaking or in good condition or whatever. So we've had a lot of back and forth with the city of Paris about what they will enable us to do with the bridge, which is still ongoing. And we're working with the engineers Bollinger and Grohmann, who are German engineers but based in Paris. And the basic principle was one of an isocharge, that today it's taking 7 lanes of traffic, then it must be able to take the equivalent weight in planting and so on. But even that is a difficult concept for the people in the city of Paris to kind of grasp. So it's still an ongoing studies that we're doing to see how much we can plant. We're most likely going to end up having to put things in temporary planters and not actually touching the historic fabric of the bridge, because that would mean probably having to redo all the waterproofing. Then you get into having to redo the structure, and it's a bit of a can of worms. And then there's this area here, which is also being pedestrianized. Again, the traffic will come in from the west towards Paris on the surface, and we've reduced the amount of traffic lanes down, and then to enable us to plant this whole edge along the Quai Branly, which is the exit from Bir Hakeim is the only exit that has lifts and disabled access. So a lot of people will be coming in on to visit the Eiffel Tower site from that side. So it'll become very heavily planted. And most of the cars then going, or all of the cars going in this direction, will go into the tunnel and then come back out again, so that the pedestrians, the millions of people, can then just move more freely across the across the Quai Branly. This gives you an idea of the sort of today, where people are constantly standing in the middle of the bridge and in the middle of lanes of traffic doing selfies with the Eiffel Tower in the background. And what we would like to do, which is continue this axis with a green raised lawn and then plant trees either side. And the buses will then be allowed to move over the bridge and along with security vehicles. And this plan shows you the whole length of the Quai Branly as you go down to the Birikem station. The project also involved redoing this building, which the architect Chartier Corbesson worked on, and we developed the landscape around that. So that was also done before the Olympics. The idea was it was going to rehouse some of the people, provide accommodation for some of the people working in the Eiffel Tower site, and also to upgrade the lockers and things like that for the sport facility. And then upgrade all of the promenade that leads you there. There are a whole series of kiosks of sort of a unified kiosk design, and food and beverage and trinkets and that kind of thing. And that is an image of, again, before and after image of the Place Branly. We also worked together with designers called Satie, who developed the kiosk design. So there are a whole series of kiosks across the site, including food and beverage and commercial kiosks and toilets. So they've developed those. And then this is an image of the Quai Branly and this whole planted aspect of the Quai Branly. And Sophie here has worked on the project for many years, as has Camille, so they can both add to the conversation. Placette Émile Antoine, so this is the little space in front of that sports building, which, earlier looked like that. They've since transformed it in a kind of interim proposal for before the Olympics, and they're sort of brightly colored, there's brightly colored paint on the ground, but it's a really cheap and cheerful tuck up for the Olympics. And then afterward, again, we'll come in and redo the plaza and film. There's a little amphitheater which will be filled in, more trees will be planted, and then this whole area will be planted with the new kiosks down the side. And then the area immediately underneath the Eiffel Tower, you can see here, these are the four pillars that sort of rise up from the ground plane. And originally I don't know if it's here, originally the pillars used to land in this picturesque garden, and over the years it was sort of eroded so that the asphalt, it goes from about here to there. So we wanted to regreen that whole area and have this, once again, this aspect of the Eiffel Tower coming down with its 4 feet into the picturesque garden, and then reinforce the main axis underneath it with these two raised lawns and the square underneath it, which reflects the underside of the Eiffel Tower. And then buried within the landscape are two bagageries, places where people can leave their luggage, because anybody who's gone here knows there's a glass fence and a kind of metalwork fence for security around the whole of the site. So you can get in for free, but you have to scan your bags and then go up into the towers. So these two facilities are for leaving your bags so that you can easily get up the tower. And there were some additional toilets that were being put in, and also all the entrances, the sort of little pavilions that are attached to the base of the tower were redesigned. And we also changed a lot of the levels just underneath the tower so we could get disabled access straight into all of the towers. And they sort of switch it around. There's always, they control the people flow by sending people to one or the other of the towers. And that's a view up from underneath the tower down to the military school. So you can see the very strong formality of the axis. And then there's the additional planting here. And Vogt had done a scheme a few years ago redoing the area around the lake, and that had just been planted. So the bit that we're adding is really, we're adding on from sort of here to that central axis with more planting. And then you can see these are the new little pavilions, which are, again, we had to grade everything so that we could get disabled access in. And the idea was really to declutter this whole, the whole underside of it, which is filled with temporary barricades and all these, million different styles of little kiosks, into something that's much more planted and green and simplified movement and easier to access. And then that's just one of the images of the area around the Eiffel Tower. And again, we looked at all the, how people movement, how people would move through, and how we could bring people from sort of all corners to lead them to the tower. This little cross section is just explaining that at the moment the alleys that are surrounding the Champ de Mars are quite wide, and we did obviously people movement studies to see how wide we actually needed the alleys to be, and found we could actually narrow them quite a bit, which allowed us to then plant underneath these trees, improve the soil conditions, and replant it. And then again, regrade things so that we can send the water and drainage to the planting. And this is just an image of the Champ de Mars looking towards the Eiffel Tower. One of the things that we had proposed so that people would not constantly be tracking over the grass or ruining the existing lawns was to raise this edge with a sort of limestone edge, which meant that people could sit on the edge rather than constantly sitting on the grass and throwing rubbish everywhere. And so it was a lot of those sort of very simple moves, which were very subtle changes to the plan by adding more places for people to sit, and just in quite subtle ways improving the landscape around it. So here you can see what it was like beforehand, and the proposal to raise these lawns with the sandstone edges. Again, this is still all in debate with the historic people, because historically it didn't have any edges, and we're arguing that it should, have the edge. So that's a whole ongoing debate. And then image of the fountain and the big space around in front of the military school, with two water features and a sort of a water scrim in front of it that can be drained down and then used for different events. And so I suppose one of our main ambitions was really to try and improve the amount of green spaces. Anne Hidalgo is very keen on bringing green and more biodiversity into the city. So we managed to increase the amount of impermeable surfaces, that is by planting them, by about 35%. So you can see that's where the site that we inherited, but we really carefully looked at where we can get the planting in, and there's a lot of challenge in doing that because there's so many underground city services in Paris and many cities, any city, but particularly here, and the services are never where you think they are. They're because the maps are old, and you have to go in and resurvey every time you want to go in the ground. So it's a real kind of knitting exercise to get it to work. And the other thing that I found interesting about working with the city of Paris is that they recycle materials. So a lot of the cobbles that come up go to a central depot, a lot of the tree grills, a lot of the stonework, and so on. So if there's this kind of central depot, which I don't know that exists in London, or I've never heard of it. And they also have their own nursery. So they can, supply a certain number of trees and planting, obviously for all their parks and green spaces. So some of the material could come from here. They didn't always have the right, the right quantity or the right plants, but at least they have the facility. And we had a lot of interesting talks about what is native planting and what is naturalized and how you design for climate change and all those kinds of things. And it's not an easy topic, and everybody has a kind of different opinion about what it should be. They wanted all plants that came from the sort of the Paris region. But the climate is changing, so we had to look also towards the Mediterranean, the things that plants that are going to be able to be drought tolerant and be able to deal with climate change and be resilient over time. So these are some of the cherry trees that have come in on the to be planted. You can see here the kind of the big root balls, and then these photos were taken in the wintertime, and you can see they're working the soils, and it's obviously a fantastic backdrop. I mean, for a site, it's not bad. And then some of the images during the construction. So all of these areas were completely laid with what's called a disactivated concrete poured in place. And then these beds will be replaced once the Olympics are finished. They are hopefully protecting a lot of the trees. A lot of these stone edges have been protected, because I'll show you some of the images of what it looks like today. But you can see the sort of the overall scale of it. I think today they've already closed off the area. I think they've already blocked private cars from going over the bridge, and they've secured this area around the Trocadero. And the idea is to not change the traffic pattern back. So once they've closed it all down for the Olympics, we will then start again in October. And those, hopefully people are used to not being able to drive over the bridge and circulate around the Trocadero and not use the site. So we'll see. I'm sure it'll be politically very challenging. And this is just showing so that all of these lawns were completely reshaped and reinforced and then re-turfed. The walls were re-rendered and re-capped. There was, all of these are boxes, box plants, which have a box blight. And so that was a whole topic of conversation about whether we should replace them now before the Olympics or just let them go and just replace the holes, which is what we ended up doing. And then a view from the Eiffel Tower itself of the bridge. So this will all be pedestrianized after the Olympics are finished. So this is the first bit that we've delivered in March of this year, and I think it looked like this for about a week, and then the Olympic Committee took over the site and they completely covered it up again. So the public could only gain access to this for a very short period of time. They actually phased the delivery, so they allowed people, they did one half and then they did the other half and then they did bits and pieces. So from around January, there was a kind of rolling partial possession of the site. But then in March, the Olympic Committee took it over and completely covered it up. But it sort of, gives you an idea of the grand access. So these pictures I took off the internet, but you can see what they're doing. So all that lawn has now been covered up with the stands, and I think that will be one of the main ceremonial spaces for the Olympics, for the prize giving with the Eiffel Tower in the background. And it's in complete lockdown now, so nobody can get in or out. And again, this is another image taken off the internet of the central space in the middle of the Champ de Mars. So they've built these huge stands there for the beach volleyball, again with the Eiffel Tower in the background. You can see the Palais de Chaillot here and the Trocadero in the background, and all those spaces will be used for Olympic events. Start on Friday. Thank you. It was interesting to me that, I mean, this is our team, but obviously the mayor's cabinet is that she's a woman, and the little team of people in the Mission Grand Projet, like 2 of them are women and 1 guy actually doing this project and Notre Dame at the same time. The client team is almost exclusively women. Our contracting team, the project managers and the engineers are also almost exclusively women. Of course, Catherine and I were leading the project. So it was just interesting to see, and a lot of young women too in the French team, which was also really refreshing.
I'm interested in the discussions around buses going through it and the debates around closing bridges and that sort of thing. Did you get involved in that, or that had been organised by Anne Hidalgo already? So you didn't.
No, we got involved in all of that. So we did it. We worked together with a firm called De Villers and Associates, and they did the sort of strategic mobility plan for how the bus routes would have to be, rerouted. And so on, and creating these hubs where you could get bicycles and public transport and all that kind of thing. But we had to have many meetings, which Sophie will remember, and probably Camille also, with the DVD, with the RAGP, with all the different services to convince them. And obviously then it was a political decision about whether it was going to be accepted or not. And the 3 arrondissements around the site, the 7th, the 15th, and the 16th, they all had their own view. And we got feedback from, and then the taxis, of course, who weren't happy at all that we wanted to block them from the river. So there was a lot of back and forth with all the city people about doing it, but for the most part, we managed to convince them that it was, or the politicians managed to convince them that that was a good thing to do. So for the most part, we've been able to realize the original plan, apart from the buses through the middle of the Champ de Mars, but that's reversible. You can, for now, for political reasons, they need to let the buses go through, but in the future, you can just stop them going. And then the big car touristique and all the what do you call them, tourist coaches and that kind of thing, the many tourist coaches, those all had places to stop so that they won't be blocking the main axis. They're sort of kept at the periphery, and eventually I think the city wants to introduce more of a minibus service where they would collect people at the periphery of Paris and then bring them up in a much smaller vehicles than these big tourist buses.
I was wondering, were there any strategies that you found through doing this that you think London maybe should have applied when it had its transformation for the Olympics? Back then, maybe there were some things you identified that I thought, oh, that could work here.
Well, I think the thing that's special about the Paris bid is that, and they won the bid on the fact that they were going to reuse a lot of their existing facilities and upgrade the existing infrastructure rather than build new buildings and roads and that kind of thing. So I think that the sort of adaptive reuse was, a good move, and other cities could learn from that.
You used one word just now, which was refreshing, so really refreshing presentation as well. But I wanted to ask, to what extent did the Olympic programme enable your programme, and to what extent did it disable it?
Well, a lot of disabling, and on the enabling side, as I said, originally when the City of Paris envisioned this project, it was supposed to have been finished by 2023 in order to cater for all the people that were going to come and visit the Olympics. So it would be a fresh, it would all be freshly done and a showcase for Paris. What happened was obviously a number of things, but COVID largely, and of the painting the 20th painting campaign of the Eiffel Tower, scraping lead, that slowed things down along with COVID. And then the replacing of some of the lifts in the Eiffel Tower, that slowed things down also. So there were delays, and then the Olympic overlay came on board. I can't remember when did they start? We started in 2019, maybe we started engaging with them around 2020 or 2021. So they didn't have much of a plan, or if they did have a plan, they weren't sharing it with us. So that overlay then came very late, where they started saying they wanted to take over certain areas. And the thing that really stopped us was, I think, security issues around traffic and transport immediately in front of the Eiffel Tower, and that that's why they stopped a lot of the work before the Olympics. So, and then there's a constant overlay of different demands and whatever, they're always throwing stuff. It's like, we want to do the Yves Saint Laurent fashion show. Could you just stop the site so we can do Yves Saint Laurent? And now Paris Seine, they want to do something, in October, just as we're starting. We want to have a big, event on the thing. Can you incorporate that into your plan? You're like, okay. But so there's this constant kind of, and then in the meantime, a lot of the other buildings were doing stuff that they didn't tell our project managers that they were doing. So the Palais de Chaillot was doing work. They were doing other tunnel works and things going on at the same time, which weren't always joined up, coordinated. So a moving target.
When we started Smart in the Field, I remember that outside the National Gallery, there's grass that nobody went on. Now it's a sort of a fest of people. How do you think, in the formality of this Parisian scene, the grass will survive? I like the idea of the edge. But, it's the same in London. Put some grass down, it's popular, it gets worn out. Is there a mechanism for it, or are we just...
Well, there's kind of grass and grass. So the grass that we usually put down for things like this it's like a sports pitch turf specification. So it's really really hard wearing and can take a lot. It's got a lot of sand in the grass, and the stuff drains down. And so I think we know how to design grass, but it's a very high spec grass. It's not your normal turf. And then the whole reason for putting the edges around it is then people sit on the edge, and it becomes you've got kilometers of stone edge that people can sit on. They can still picnic on the grass, but at least there is an alternative for how that can be managed.
And a lot of maintenance
And maintenance, and there's also. Well, you have to but they have to mow the lawn anyway. So there's not that much more maintenance to it.
And are they buying into that? Because our parks are getting wide, though. You're introducing more biodiversity, which is great, but just the balance between the manicured and the wild is maintenance and cost.
Well, maintenance is a problem everywhere. So they have the DEV is the Parks and Gardens people. Everybody's strapped for resources and so on. But they do. It's obviously a world-class site with millions of tourists, and I'm hoping that after the Olympics, they will have done a lot of work to the lawns and I'm hoping that then after the Olympics they'll come back and really invest in the upkeep of the site that they've just spent X number of millions on. So
yeah, I have a question about your negotiations, relationship with the authorities that are approving the scheme, and how they appreciated the objectivity that an international consultant can bring to a site, like not being French, looking at it from the outside. And obviously it's positive because they're implementing the scheme, but is there something you could talk about that and how to manage
objectivity? Objective. I think the thing that was interesting is that it wasn't joined up. So we had you know, we would get comments back in the form of a kind of spreadsheet that were, you know, thousands of comments from the transport people and another 1,000 comments from the parks people and another few hundred comments from the cycling lobby and then another, and they weren't all joined up all the time. And where did they feel that we were objective coming from the outside? I don't know, that's a difficult question. I don't.
To join up all their individual kind of comments and requirements and come back with something.
Well, yeah, I mean,
No, exactly.
you have to get the approval, but it's constantly changing. So we had approval, we got planning, we submitted for planning in 2020. And then we received planning, but with, you know, spreadsheets full of comments that are supposed to be taken on board for when you actually do the tender project. And even to this day, everything's tendered, it's about to start on site, and the DVD has come back with more changes that they want because the cycling lobby wants to cross over this way and not that way. And, you know, it's little things like that, which they, you know, they're all variations and changes and late-minute modifications and things like that. But did they feel that we were more objective, or that we brought something, a kind of foreigner's eye to it? I don't know, Sophie, how would you answer that question? Did they?
I would say that they believed that Catherine had a lot of legitimacy in everything landscape-wise. Maybe not in the mobility scheme, but maybe in the landscape side of things. So they would it would come the other way around, like they would be like trusting her expertise. In that way, they were all like happy that Catherine and Mary and the office would like make comment that would not be French comments that they hear every day and with a big like kind of renowned like image. So
And it's actually a very simple plan, you know, in landscape search, it's not actually a complicated project. It's pretty straightforward, there are no tricky details, there's just a lot of very big, strong moves being implemented. And you have to fight for a lot, so.
Curious when you mentioned about, you were thinking about, well, some people were suggesting French or Parisian trees, but you needed to find ones that would suit climate change. Did you come up against people denying that things were going to change? Was there any difficulties?
No, I think it was more a debate amongst kind of experts. So we were working with the Parks and Gardens people. They have, you know, they have certain amount of regulations. I can't remember. They wanted 30% of the plants to be native plants. But then you get into a discussion of how do you define native? Is native like just around the Paris region, or is native, can you include like into Germany? And then if you take climate change on board, you've got to go further south to be native and resilient and adaptable. So there were no climate deniers. They all, you know, completely understand what the problem was. But the actual debate is quite interesting. We saw it on this, but we also see it in projects like a Highgate Cemetery that we're working on at the moment about what is the appropriate plant and what do you consider native and what are you trying to do to respond to climate change, and how do you best do it, you know, because things move on. What was native, and then there's native and there's naturalized, and you know it's a whole debate.
Do you find it really different between different cities then if you compare?
That discussion, yeah, because it's quite particular. Obviously, if we're working in Spain, it's kind of one thing. If you're working in the tropics, it's a different conversation. But everybody's having the conversation. It's just different, you know, different trees, different plants, different water requirements, and.
What's your hunch that the city will see the rest of the vision through? Because on the one hand, Hildegard seems to have she operates with a lot of conviction and determination, like Paris has changed quite a lot, I think, in the last decade or so. Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, these grand projets seem to kind of stutter towards the end, the money starts to run out. I'm thinking of Valencia after phase 1. So are you hearing positive things, or is it a bit up in the air?
Oh, I think it's very much up in the air. They've already, taken out the Champ de Mars piece out of the contract. They're looking at what's being done underneath the Eiffel Tower. And Hidalgo's tenure is up in 2026. So that's why there's a kind of pressure to get everything done now between this autumn and 2026 in her kind of, tenure, because it's her project. And of course, if somebody else becomes the mayor and they're a different party, they'll, like Rashida Dati, tried to scupper the project at one point. Type of plants. Well, the sort of the planting palette within this within the main axis is very formal. We introduced cherry trees. There were Polonia trees on either side. There's formal hedging, which is an Ilex crenata, because we can't use the box anymore. And then there are roses, which are actually fairly drought tolerant. But then within the sort of picturesque garden and the piece along the Quai Branly, that is a very rich palette of different plants. And Catherine worked on the planting palette. I'm not a plants expert person, but she was very much inspired by French Impressionist paintings and the sort of the color palette that you see in those paintings. So it's about color, and it's about texture, and about resilience, and sort of putting those together. But the planting palette itself is quite rich. I mean, there's loads of plants that will go into the picturesque pieces, and the ones obviously in the formal are quite traditional, formal, sculpted plants.
Okay.
Just a question, tracking back to what you said at the very beginning. We know Paris, has a huge problem with rodents. Was there any landscaping strategies that, maybe it was the type of plants you used, or I don't know whether the
Anti-rat mesh.
Yeah.
So underneath all the lawns, we had to put in an anti-rat mesh, so that because they come up from below. And so we put down anti-rat mesh, which was a whole thing. The project manager's like, what's this anti-bonjour, what is it, anti-rat mesh? And when the Olympics, funnily enough, when the Olympics came on board, we had done one side that had the rat mesh, and the other side, they didn't want to put the rat mesh in because they wanted to get all their stands, the feet for the stands down. They had to do all these trial holes, and the rat mesh was going to get in the way. So there's a rat mesh on one side and no rat mesh on the other. So we can do a little
That's exciting.
One question with regard to the heritage of the site. Obviously you're putting in an awful lot of new stuff, but you presumably have to analyse what's there and decide what's good and what's bad and what's worth keeping, and that must be quite a task in its own right.
Well, a lot of that, the research and the background and the guidelines had been done by the Parks and Gardens people. So they had identified the significant year for each element. It was 1937 for the area around the Palais de Chaillot, and there were other years that have been determined as the historical year. Of course, the Champ de Mars has changed over the years. It's been used for exhibitions. There have been buildings taken away. So they had established what they wanted the significant year to be, and then it was sort of open to us to interpret that, what the axes and the widths of things and so on. And we had a lot of debates with them about what that meant, but they had set out the guidelines and done. I mean, we did our own research, but they had there are volumes of historical research from the Parks and Gardens people.
Thank you very much for introducing both your scheme, but also, as I say, an introduction to all the interesting things which we're going to be seeing in Paris over the next few weeks, and really fascinating to see how Paris responds to the Olympics and compare it to the way that we did here. And just one final thing I'd quite like to ask. So when you presented and you talked about the picturesque and the formal, did you present it as the English and the French, or was it the...
No, but it was sort of implied.
Very good. Well, thank you very much indeed, and we'll carry on the conversation if you wish with a drink. So thank you very
Yeah.
much, Mary.